Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexx here with another Master Duel video for you. So I do have some more branded Despia games for you all here today. Was playing a lot with the deck around the last few days, well, as of the time I've been recording this, which today is the 12th. This will probably go up a few days later. But yeah, I've been playing a decent bit with this deck here as I moved up from Platinum through up to Diamond. So yeah, usually the way I like to ladder every season, well, most seasons anyway, I've been changing it up lately just as, you know, IRL stuff changes too, but like, I like to get to Diamond every season. I used to push for Diamond 1 every season, or like Platinum 1, whatever the top rank was. I feel like I've kind of chilled out on that a little bit because there's honestly not a whole lot of incentive to reach Diamond 1 other than like bragging rights. And you know, it's the extra gems are nice. It's a few 100 gems here and there, but you know, honestly, at this point, I'm pretty content just to reach Diamond and then just kind of use like whatever from there. Not to say like I stopped trying altogether. I even end up doing usually a bit of incremental climbing just while I'm recording videos in Diamond rank, but yeah, I mean, this season I actually managed to get up there definitely earlier than last. Well, last season, to be fair, I had not only IRL stuff going on, but it's also the League Festival as well. That was kind of like drawing attention away from like regular ladders. So, but yeah, like just yesterday, I managed to get up to Diamond, and I did that final push here with Branded Despia. So to kind of go into my main point, to kind of tie it back to Branded Despia, I've been using this deck a fair bit lately, just as I push through Platinum. I just like to make sure I get through Platinum, that way I don't have to, like, you know, climb up through Gold and Plat next season just to get back up to Diamond. So, now that we're there, I'm going to be doing, like, you know, some other, like, more rogue decks, now that I'm not, like, as concerned about just making sure I'm up to Diamond. But if you do want to get up to Diamond or Diamond 1, then Branded Despia is absolutely the way to do it. You know, a few days ago, we posted our video that showed off the tier list for, or I guess rather the breakdown of decks submitted to Master Duel Meta that hit Diamond or Diamond 1 only from ranked ladder games, not including tournament, and even, you know, excluding all tournament games and only factoring in like the ranked ladder. Despia was still showing, Branded Despia in particular, was still showing a 12.9% representation rate of those decks submitted in that time frame of the 28th to the 9th. So, yeah, suffice it to say, if you're looking for a really, really good deck to ladder with, I mean, this is obviously, like, the one to do it. I've seen a couple people ask me, like, is this list capable of hitting Tier 1? Absolutely. No doubt in my mind this deck can hit Tier 1. There are a lot of decks that can. I think some people kind of tend to underestimate what all can, you know, or not hit Tier 1, hit Diamond 1. Being a Tier 1 deck, this is definitely more than capable of doing it. Like I was going to say, I think some people tend to underestimate sometimes what all is capable of hitting Diamond 1. It's a lot more than you think. Like, you know, anything that's tiered or even in the rogue category is capable of hitting Diamond 1. Again, referring to the, you know, tier list kind of Diamond ranked ladder breakdown that I did the other day. You know, we saw a whole bunch of like random decks in the other category, like Math Mech, like Tri-Brigade, Crystal Beast, Teller Knights. These are all decks that have hit Diamond or Diamond 1, so it is definitely very possible to do it with a myriad of decks, but especially this one. This is arguably one of the easiest ones to do it. Once you learn the deck, of course, it always comes with that caveat there. Yeah, and as far as like the build itself goes, we haven't changed anything. I've still liked where we're at with this build. Thanks again to the person who suggested the Effect Veiler. It's been very, very nice to have that. I don't know if I couldn't tell you off the top of my head if I've actually drawn it with Guardian Chimera and then used it yet, but that is a very good reason to include it. Also, being a light monster for fusions is not that bad either. Honestly, even being a tuner could potentially open up some niche extra deck options, but the extra deck is already tight enough as it is. I know I talked about putting in Muddy Mud Dragon, but I do like the Starving Venom, I think, just a bit more. I think it tends to come up a little bit more often than the Muddy Mud Dragon, and is honestly just a better card than the Muddy Mud Dragon. The Mud Dragon really just exists to make Super Poly, like, turn it into removal, whereas the Starving Venom can not only accomplish that in a lot of scenarios, but is also just a good card in its own right. So, keeping the extra deck just, and the main deck obviously just as is for the time being, so yeah, that being the case, I don't really have anything to say about the build in particular. Obviously, like I said, just still been very consistent and solid. So let's break it down card by card, and then let's go and take a look at some gameplay. We're playing 1 Effect Veiler, 2 Despain Tragedy, 3 Maxx, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 3 Edge Imp Chain, 1 Fairy Tale Snow, 2 Fallen of Albaz, 3 Aluber the Jester of Despia, 1 Dramaturge of Despia, 1 Ad Libitum of Despia, 1 Nibiru the Primal Being, 1 Harpies Feather Duster, 2 Polymerization, 1 Foolish Burial, 2 Frightfur Patchwork, 3 Branded Fusion, 2 Super Polymerization, 2 Call by the Grave, 1 Crossout Desginator, 2 Branded Opening, 2 Branded in Red, and then finally 1 Infinite Impermanence. Extra deck is going to be 1 Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, 1 Predaplant Dragostepelia, 1 Titanklad the Ash Dragon, 2 Albion the Branded Dragon, 1 Despian Quaretits, 2 Masquerade the Blazing Dragon, 2 Mirrorjade the Iceblade Dragon, 2 Lubellion the Searing Dragon, 2 Guardian Chimera, and then finally 1 Despian Proskenion. Alright, that's going to take care of the list here. Now let's go and take a look at some games. Okay, so the first game we're going to take a look at is against Branded Eldlich, which I swear, you know, I feel like I run into as many Eldliches as Flaunderies. It's funny, I'm thinking again about, like, the statistics that we saw, that objective data, and just comparing it to my own, like, subjective experience, which is why you can never rely on your own subjective experience to, you know, fully account for a metagame there. So, I'm going to lead off with the Aluber here. I've already got both Branded Fusion and Branded in Red in my hand, so I'm going to search for the Branded Opening. Usually in this scenario, like, you know, if I summon Aluber, and obviously if I don't have any of these, you know, you search Branded Fusion. If you've already got the Fusion, search Branded in Red, and if you already have both these, you can just grab a Branded Opening. And I usually like to discard this in order to have some protection in the graveyard for destruction effects during my opponent's turn, in this scenario in particular. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and activate the aforementioned Branded Fusion, sending, of course, the Albaz and the Tragedy for the Lubellion. Like I mentioned, I'm going to use Lubellion to discard the Branded Opening here, although I'll actually end up kind of wishing I discarded the Fallen of Albaz, actually, because I have this Branded in Red in hand. If I recall correctly, if this is the game I'm thinking of, or at least I've been in situations similar to this, where I end up discarding the Branded Opening, even though I've had the Branded, or the Fallen of Albaz in hand, and then later in the turn I realized, like, oh, I could have actually made plays if I had put back, or if I discard the Albaz and then put it back with the Branded Red. I think it was actually this here. Oh, no, I maybe we'll just grab the Despian Tragedy here. So I'm sorry, that was a different game I was thinking of. Yeah, but here I'm actually going to use the Branded Red. I'm not sure, like, I was kind of experimenting with this line to see how, like, you know, basically how I feel about this play. You know, making the Dragostepelia and then getting back the Mirrorjade on the opponent's turn here. No, this is actually the game I was thinking of, because I was able to use that Branded in Red, but because I did this setup here, now I don't have anything for the Branded Red that I'm going to search off the Albion with the Mirrorjade here. So this was actually, I'm sorry, this was the game I was thinking of, where I was thinking, oh, I should have actually discarded this Fallen of Albaz instead of the Branded Opening, because I didn't, you know, obviously end up using the Albaz for anything, and I was always going to put an Albaz back into my deck anyway, so it's not like I was going to run out of them. So, yeah, ended up being a slight misplay there. I will still, of course, search the Branded in Red here, because, you know, one, there's no reason not to, and two, my opponent might not necessarily realize that I can't use a Branded in Red. It might still try to play around it, maybe, but in any case, your opponent's going to lead off with the Eldlich's effect, discarding it with the Elixir of Black Awakening in order to get rid of my Dragostepelia. I was a bit confused to see that at first, but then when I saw the Branded Fusion, this makes a lot more sense. Okay, it's pretty obvious they're going to try to Lubellion here, and they wanted to get my negation off of the board. The Banish doesn't do anything against Lubellion, because Lubellion can, where is it? Lubellion can shuffle the materials back from anywhere, including the Banish. So removing Lubellion off the field, even banishing it, doesn't actually stop the effect. Important to be mindful of that. I've got an Ash Blossom here, so this Branded Fusion isn't going to be anything to worry about, but it makes sense why my opponent removed my Dragostepelia. Because again, I was like, you know, Eldlich being concerned about Dragostepelia felt a little bit weird, but alright, looks like they're going to use the Golden Land to search the Guardian. From there, they're going to bring back the Eldlich to the hand. I can just banish it with the Mirrorjade, so I'm not scared of it at all. You might also be wondering why I summoned the Mirrorjade in defense mode. I usually do this just to play around Lightning Storm. I honestly even usually throw it in this zone for protection as well. You know, there aren't many common effects that do this, but there's some link effects, like Relinquished Anima, or what is it, the Geo something. There's another Link monster that can like switch control of stuff pointing to zones. Basically, long story short, to get around your opponent's Link monsters that can potentially mess with your stuff, this is the safest zone to put things in. So putting Mirrorjade in defense mode in this zone is to play around a bunch of niche stuff that's like not really ever going to come up, but there's kind of no reason not to play around it. Well, Lightning Storm is relatively common. That could very easily come up, so yeah, opponent will set the Conquistador and then a whole bunch of back row, which is a little scary, but we know what 3 of them are, right? Like, we know that there's a Conquistador, we know that there's an Eldlich of Scarlet Sanguine, and we know that there is a Guardian of the Golden Lands. So between those 3, I'm not like super duper scared. It's really just the 2 unknowns that are going to be something we have to consider here. I'll switch out the Branded Infusion during the end phase, because, you know, again, we sent the Albion to banish that Eldlich. It might have behooved me to kind of consider maybe banishing something else, but I think searching up the Branded Infusion was more important than having access to Albion later, is why I said that. I was a little concerned about throwing out both my Albions this early, but it's also against Eldlich. I'm not really trying to burst them down for an OTK with Albion. I'm really just trying to, like, grind out the slow game, grind them out of their advantage, and then we'll just win the game like that. The Patchwork is a very nice draw here. Going to get a Polymerization and Edge Imp Chain for advantage later in the turn, potentially, as well as a potential fusion later in the turn. But now I also need to discard with my Lubellion, this Edge Imp Chain that can just get me advantage right back, so I'm not going to end up losing out on any. Like I just mentioned, the advantage is actually going to be fairly important here, honestly, because it's going to really play a part in how we're able to grind Eldlich out. These control type decks do tend to focus a lot more on advantage than a lot of other decks. Excuse me. So the opponent's going to flip up a bunch of their stuff, including a summon limit here. I actually should have chained. So because I knew the Scarlet Sanguine was face down, if I wanted to play around Conquistador's destruction effect, I technically should have chained the Branded Red to the Conquistador and not waited for the Scarlet Sanguine. However, I did find something I wanted to destroy with Guardian Chimera that is a lot more, which is this summon limit here. Sorry, let me take a sip of water. One moment. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna make the Guardian Chimera like I mentioned with the Branded in red. I can use the Branded opening to protect it from the Conquistador. That's actually another reason I wasn't super concerned about chaining the Branded in red when I did, but now I'm just going to go ahead and use the Guardian Chimera's effect to pop the, well, I was going to go ahead, actually, interesting thing here, right? So because Guardian Chimera does the draw and then the destruction, my plan was to pop the summon limit and then one of the random back rows, right? But since I actually drew exactly Harpy's Feather Duster, I decided to just target the 2 face down cards instead, because, I don't know, there's a world, right, where one of these face downs is like Solemn Judgment or Golden Land Forever, and my opponent for some reason hasn't used it yet, or it's just some card to counter Harpy's Feather Duster. So obviously it didn't end up being that at all, but I wanted to remove the unknown factor before just addressing the cards that are already face up. Again, because I drew exactly Harpy's Feather Duster, if I had not drawn that, I would have picked off one of the random back rows still, but then Summon Limit definitely would have been something I wanted to pick off. I also didn't know if one of them was maybe just going to be another, like, I don't know, it's just, you never know with the face down cards, so I think it's important to take those out first and then address the known threats in a situation like this. But in any case, yeah, I can just go ahead and Harpy's Feather Duster away these other back rows here. And I wasn't concerned with destroying the Eldlich here, because like as you can see, I'm just going to fuse with it with the Albaz here. Now, that was maybe a bit of an early concede for my opponent. I actually didn't have lethal because the Guardian Chimera was made with the Branded in red. It's not able to attack directly. I did so well, you know what, though, I did actually think I have lethal, because Fallen of Albaz fuses with the Eldlich to make Titanklad, right? And then we poly the Tragedy and the Dramaturge for anything, probably like a Masquerade or something. And then we could just summon the Dramaturge. So, JK, that was actually lethal, but that was still a slightly early concede from the opponent. They technically didn't know I had lethal because, again, the Guardian Chimera was not actually able to attack directly there. So, but in any case, there is that game. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Okay, so this duel is going to be kind of an interesting one. It's also going to be a bit of a brief one. It's only one turn. It's only the opponent's turn. I played against what appears to be some sort of Lunalight FTK deck. I'm assuming it's an FTK because I saw a Catapult Turtle. But I don't know if I'm super, like, 100% sure exactly. Like, I looked over the opponent's deck list, and I think I have a vague idea of how their FTK works, but In any case here, we opened with Maxx and Ash Blossom, so if we're going second, this is definitely, these are definitely two great cards to open with. One thing you do have to be mindful, though, like when you're looking at your opening hand, is if you're going second, even if you have a bunch of good, like, responses, you gotta think about how you're gonna follow up as well. And there are some times where you'll, like, play against Eldlich and they'll just set 5 and you don't get to use either of these, so there are times where you have to just, you know, only rely on the other stuff in your hands. So even though this is looking great, I am a little concerned about the rest of this. I don't really have an active play here. So again, just something to be mindful of. Opponent's going to start with a Foolish Burial Goods. Now, as soon as I see this come down, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is probably Sky Striker is the first thing I'm thinking. If I had to guess, this is definitely an unusual card to see, but Sky Striker is the most popular deck that would play this card. So I'm immediately thinking, like, should I Ash Blossom this? If I think I'm playing against Sky Striker, then I definitely shouldn't, right? There are much better things to hit with the Ash Blossom. But what if I'm not playing against Sky Striker is my next thought. I did pop over to Master Duel Meta real quick. I just typed in Foolish Burial Goods. I just looked at all the decks that are playing it, and I'm like, I didn't look at every single one of them because I didn't, you know, feel like I had the time to, but I thought to myself, there are enough weird things going on here. There are enough weird decks that want to do stuff with this card that I'm just going to go ahead and Ash Blossom it. And also, I've talked about this before, particularly during the opponent's first turn where they don't have as many resources to work with. I think it's better to Ash early sometimes because after I Ash this Foolish Burial Goods, now my opponent's got 4 cards to work with whatever they're trying to combo off with instead of 5. You know, whatever they'll send it with the Foolish Burial Goods. Plus, whatever they'll send is obviously, like, something that's going to be very important to them. So, leaving them with few and, more importantly, randomized resources as opposed to, like, more concentrated and dedicated resources, I think is the better thing to do when you don't exactly know what's going on, like I did here. Now, I looked at their deck list, and I think what they would actually do is send the Lunalight Trap card that you can banish for the deck to special Lunalight from deck. So I'm actually glad I ashed that Foolish Burial Goods, so I hear they're going to summon the Kaleido Chick, sending the Emerald Bird. At this point, I'm just kind of like reading my opponent's effects as they go to make sure I'm not missing an opportunity to Maxx. I don't until they get the Perfume out. So obviously when they activate their Perfume to summon their monster from the graveyard, I'm going to go ahead and throw out the Maxx here. Immediately drawing Effect Veiler, which is a pretty good draw here. Yeah, I decided to let the Emerald Bird effect resolve. I didn't think that was really worth Veilering. When this Force Strix comes down, however, I'm definitely going to Veiler that. This Nibiru is a very welcome sight as well. Again, just going off my, you know, philosophy of what I just said of, like, I don't know exactly what my opponent is doing here, but leaving them with a few, like, randomized resources. Now, actually, this one's not, like, so randomized because I do have a search with the Lunalight Perfume, but basically, moral of the story is I don't think there's any reason to give them a free search off the Force Strix here. I think what they were actually planning on doing is searching Zephyros, like Blackwing Zephyros here. It seems like their OTK involves using Zephyros plus Catapult Turtle. I think maybe bouncing the Lunalight Pendulum monster. Again, I'm not like 100% sure. Tiger, Lunalight Tiger. This card's ridiculous, by the way, Lunalight Tiger. I think a lot of people know this because I know Lunalights have had a lot more time in the meta in the past when I wasn't playing, like before Master Duel meta came out, but Lunalight Tiger is a completely ridiculous card. Actually, so is Kaleido Chick. Kaleido Chick, as we just saw there, is actually extremely similar to Cherubni. It sends from the deck to the graveyard, I believe, as a cost. Yeah, it sends as a cost, so even if the effect is negated, they still get to Foolish their monsters, which activate from the graveyard. So, I'm not gonna lie, seeing this combo kind of made me want to play Lunalights. Not necessarily an FTK version, but just like Lunalights in general. They seem like a cool deck, so opponent's gonna go for another Force Strix here. I was gonna activate Nibiru. My original plan when I saw Force Strix come down, because I had my toggle set to on. I like to do that when I have Nibiru in hand, especially against combo decks where I'm not familiar with how my opponent's comboing out. So my plan was to, once the summon of Force Strix had resolved, to then Nibiru so that they don't get the search. But because I top deck Imperm, I decided to hold off on the Nibiru and just negate the Force Strix with the Imperm right now. Alright, so then they're going to link away the Force Strixes into the Raid Raptor link monster, and then from there they're going to, I believe, summon, what was it? Oh, they'll use the effect, of course, to summon, then they'll get the Zephyros from the deck. So I think I actually should have Nibiru'd here, technically, if I had again known how the combo was going to play out. I should have Nibiru'd here because with the two Force Strix, or the two, Force Strixes and the Y Strix gone, I think that would have been all the searchable ways for my opponent to search out Zephyros here. But I'll just go ahead and Nibiru at this point, because, again, I still wasn't sure what they were doing. I thought they were going to start link climbing, and I also mistakenly thought that my opponent was out of gas, right? Because I looked at the graveyard, I was like, well, I know they have Zephyros, but I don't think they can bounce the token, because you have to return the card to the hand as a cost, so they can't Zephyros with what they have on board. And I knew they had the Pendulum Monster, Tiger, in hand, but I was like, okay, if they get one bounce with that, they only have one other card in the hand, what's the worst they could do? Well, I didn't realize that Lubellion Tiger was a soft once per turn. I think I balanced it in my brain as a hard once per turn, which I kind of sometimes tend to do with card effects I'm not familiar with. Like, if I don't know exactly what they do, I'll kind of assume they're more balanced than they actually are, but no, the opponent's actually going to get to keep comboing here, which is definitely scary. Going into the Soul Shaver Force in order to rank up into any rank 6 is actually going to be Beatrice here. And then with the Beatrice, they'll end up sending the Catapult Turtle from deck to graveyard. This is when I had my, like, oh shit moment. But then they conceded right after that. This might have been a bot now that I think about it. Because I'm thinking, like, okay, they sent Catapult Turtle and then conceded immediately right after. My first thought is like, oh, they must have realized that they can't actually bring the Catapult Turtle back, and that's why they conceded. But the fact that they comboed up to that point and then conceded right at that point is a little sus. I don't know. I think that might have ended up being a bot now that I actually think about it a little more. But in any case, we were able to overcome the bot, the FTK, I guess regardless of whether it was a bot or a person. I want to show that duel off because I think it's important to be mindful of when you use your disruptions. I think that duel is actually a really good example of that. And I'm not saying that I use them perfectly. I definitely should have held... I actually should have used the Nibiru again when the Raid Raptor link came out, so that way Zephyros couldn't have been searched from the deck to begin with. But, you know, all the same, we end up winning, so... yeah, again, just be important to be mindful of when we're using disruptions, especially against decks that we're not familiar with. It's important to be extremely mindful of that. So there's that game. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Alright, so this duel here is going to be a Despia mirror match. So this one is actually a pretty interesting one. The opponent's playing a lot of tech cards, I noticed. So it would be interesting to see how that ends up playing out here. Looking at this opening hand, it's alright, you know, we've got the Aluber plus the Edge Imp Chain, so there's not a whole lot more we could ask for, except ideally, like, you know, a call by our Crossout for something like this Effect Veiler, but, you know, it happens, what can you do? So Aluber's going to get Veilered. I'm going to set both Super Polys in pass here. I debated whether I should set just one or two, but I decided that, you know, Feather Duster is a very narrow thing to play around, and it actually is a very good thing I set two, because my opponent had exactly a Cosmic Cyclone here, which is not a card you see very often. Opponent's hand is looking fairly dead. They set a couple of cards in pass here. I do think sometimes it's kind of the drawback of playing a lot of tech like my opponent is doing here, is that you kind of end up, especially because they went over 40 cards to do it, I feel like you're kind of just making your deck more brickier by doing that. Not saying that the tech isn't worth playing, but I think it's important to be mindful of, one, staying as close to 40 as possible when possible, and two, making sure that we're not cutting out, like, you know, again, we're not including so much tech that our hand is mostly tech, which I feel like might have been what happened to my opponent here. So, drawing the Maxx for turn, I'm just going to summon Edge Imp Chain, and then, you know, not only battle with it for extra damage, but just use the effect for some extra advantage, thinning out the deck, just kind of giving myself as good of a shot as I can of getting the draws I need. So I flipped up Super Poly here thinking, oh, I'll pitch the Edge Imp Chain because I get to search off one of them, but I actually don't end up getting that. So it was a bit of a mistake to discard and fuse with both Edge Imp Chains there. But we can still put our opponent down to 1500, get a Masquerade out, so they'll only be able to activate a limited number of effects. Opponent's going to throw out a Raigeki, which is going to answer the Masquerade. Still going to cost them 600 points, bringing them down to only 900. They'll then set a monster in pass. So, again, like, when you're playing like Branded Despia and you already have such efficient outs of boards, like, I don't know how necessary tech like Raigeki and Cosmic Cyclone are. And again, I just feel like in this particular scenario, they might have ended up weighing my opponent's deck down. Not that I have much better things going on here. I drew a second Maxi, and given that my opponent... Also, I don't know that they're playing Branded Despia at this point. These are the only cards that I've seen. So, really, my opponent, to my knowledge at this point in the game, could be playing, like, absolutely anything, having only seen these cards. So, I'm just going to set this Maxi and pass. I don't feel like I need to, especially given how slowly my opponent's been playing. At this point, they normal summon the Albaz, and then send both the Albaz and the Ghost Ogre for a Vert Anaconda, but I've actually done this too. I won't fault my opponent too much here. I've definitely instinctually made Vert Anaconda in a situation like this before actually checking to see if I had 900 life points. This attack was super risky. This was a very, very risky attack. I would not have made this attack at all if I was my opponent. It's so easy for me. Like, if I had an Ash Blossom set here, my opponent would just lose right now. And it's not uncommon at all for Ash Blossom to be the card that's set here. My opponent actually got fairly lucky in that it was a Maxx, so even though I'm at full, my opponent's at 900, I do still have to be, you know, somewhat mindful of, oh, and they've got the call by for the Masquerade here, so I do have to be mindful of how I play here, even though if you look at life points, it might seem like I'm at a huge advantage, but I'm actually pretty scared here because, well, until I top deck Braided Fusion. Before I drew, I was feeling a little bit anxious here because I was like, okay, you know, it's really easy for my opponent to normal summon something and then potentially link climb. I know now they're playing Branded Despia because they summoned, well, I think they probably are because they summoned an Albaz, but again, I actually still don't know that for sure. So there is still the possibility that my opponent could link climb with his Vert Anaconda next turn. Plus, I don't know. I can't always assume. It's actually not good to assume your opponent hasn't misplayed. For all I know, my opponent could have potentially made this Vert Anaconda with the intention to link climb on the next turn. So, in any case here, I'm just going to go ahead and play a bit cautiously, especially given they have a face down card, or was my plan until I drew the Braided Fusion. Now I can just rip this out with no problem, until my opponent Crossout Desginators. Now I know for sure they're playing Branded Despia. Well, I'm still, again, don't know for sure, but I'm fairly confident they're playing Branded Despia. Here I'm going to actually normal summon the Tragedy, and then run it into the Vert Anaconda. I'm doing this to set up the Tragedy and set the Branded Fusion for my next turn there. And I'm also using the Tragedy effect on this turn, just in case there comes a situation where I need to activate Despain Tragedy during my next turn, which is reasonably likely given that I'll probably fuse it away with the Branded Fusion here. So, but yeah, now I've also set up a threat for my opponent. Like, now they have to deal with a threat, like a proactive threat from me. They've got an Albaz, but that's not going to be enough. They're just going to end up conceding at that point, which actually kind of surprises me. Can they not fuse with Albaz in that situation? On either field. I mean, oh, you can't use other monsters you control. I always miss that line of Albaz, so it does have to be an opponent's monster. Okay, gotcha. So I thought that was probably the case. I've never really ended up in a situation where I had to, where I was thinking I might have to fuse with Albaz off only my own cards, but you can't do that anyway. So, so yeah, there is that game from the mirror match there. Again, mirror match with some interesting tech choices. I think that did contribute to my opponent's draws, like I said. In this game in particular, I don't think that it does like every single game, but I think overall, like statistically, it's better to have a smaller deck with less disruption in tech. Sometimes, not all the time, but in any case, now I'm just rambling. I've got one more game. Let's go and just jump straight into it. Alright, last duel for this video is going to be against a Subterror Guru control deck. So, this is the deck that uses Floodgates in combination with Subterror Guru, Searching the Fiendus, which is an Omni-Negate hand trap. Very, very powerful. We're going to go second. We did open a very, very good going second hand here. Maxx, Ash, and Imperm. Or it would have been very good going second hand if our opponent didn't set a bunch of cards and then pass over to us. So, you know, it's like, I had one of those like eye roll moments of like, of course, you know, of course I drew Maxx, Ash, and Imperm going second against a stun deck. So, yeah, what can you do? Summon the Aluber, it gets Solemn Striked here. That's relatively fine with me because I've got a braided opening. I'm just going to set a bunch of stuff and pass, setting Imperm in this column to hit this back row potentially. Opponent's going to flip up their Subterror Nemesis Archer, so I'm thinking it's either, you know, it's obviously either going to be Guru Control that's like teching this card, or maybe they do regularly play this card, I don't know, or it's just going to be a regular Subterror deck. In any case, I now have a better idea of what I'm going up against, so this Ash Blossom is looking a little bit more useful potentially than I thought it might have been initially when I saw my opponent set a bunch of back row and then pass, but more importantly, my opponent's also given me a target for my Infinite Impermanence here to lock down this face down card. So I'm going to start with the Patchwork to see if I can bait out a face down or an Ash Blossom. I've got a call by, so if it's an Ash Blossom, I'm not super scared of it. They don't have anything, so I'll flip up Branded Opening to lock down this face down before I flip up the, or I flip up the Imperm before the Branded Opening to lock down that face down there. Alright, so from here they've got pretty typical you know, I'm doing rather typical stuff, searching the Branded Fusion, activating it. The opponent's got an Ash Blossom, which kudos to my opponent for holding out on playing it to this point. They did have a couple of opportunities with the Patchwork and the Branded opening to play it, but they actually did save it for the Branded Fusion, which is what they should be doing, so... I've got a call by though, so it doesn't actually end up mattering because I do have Z call by, and the opponent just concedes at that point. I was planning to OTK. I'm trying to figure out how I was going to do. Well, I had the Poly and the Edge Imp Chain in hand, so I don't think it would have been too difficult for me to figure it out there. Branded Fusion sending. Well, I could send the the Despia to search for the Dramaturge, right, and then use that to get some damage. Also, could make an Albion there. Well, I couldn't make an Albion with the Branded, or the Despain Tragedy. I could use a Lubellion to make an Albion. In any case, I would have been able to figure it out, I'm sure. Right? Right. Alright, so that's all the duels that we have for today. Let's go ahead and just move now to the outro. Alright, everybody, thank you so very much for watching, especially all the way to the very end. I greatly appreciate that. Also appreciate those of you who are commenting and or subscribing. Comments, as always as ever, let me know what you think of the, not only the builds, but the gameplay as well. If you've got any feedbacks, I'm always open to that. Also, just about, like, the channel, just about anything. Really, you all give very, very good feedback, so I am always interested to hear from you. And subscribing. So actually, this is the first video I've recorded since I hit 10,000 subscribers. Yay, that's awesome. Thank you all so very much. That's super rad. I should have actually said this at the beginning of the video. I really should have, but in any case, thank you all so very much. I can't believe we're actually at this point. I really didn't think it was going to happen. Like, when I posted that first, like, Tri-Brigade video back on January 24th, you know, I was kind of thinking, you know, I posted it and I went to sleep and I remember thinking, it'd be cool if I woke up and this had 100 views, and I woke up and it had 1,000, and then the next day it had 10,000. So, and then from there, I just kind of started posting Master Duel videos every day. So, it's been an awesome ride up to this point, and I'm, you know, don't think that just because I said that we're done. We're definitely far from done. You can definitely still expect daily Master Duel content out of me. So definitely go ahead and subscribe if that's something you're looking for. You can like I said, expect that daily Master Duel content from me. But yeah, that's going to be all the time that we have for today. So without further ado, this is XLex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.